I never thought my wedding would begin with a declaration of possession. The music played softly, glasses clinked in the background, and the chandelier sparkled from the high ceiling. The scent of hydrangeas mingled with the gentle aroma of scented candles enveloping the room. I was still basking in the afterglow of my first dance with Marcus, my husband, when my mother approached. She smiled. Her smile soft, radiant, and seemingly rehearsed for weeks to be perfect for this exact moment. She stepped closer, placing her hand on mine, as if about to whisper a heartfelt blessing. I tilted my head, ready to receive what I thought would be a tender gesture. Then she spoke as casually as if discussing a dessert change. "The car Marcus's parents gave you, I think it should go to your sister. Her car's broken down badly. You understand, don't you?" I stepped back slightly, not because I didn't hear her clearly, but because I couldn't believe what I'd just heard. The car, the only wedding gift from my in-laws, wasn't extravagant or overly luxurious. But it was a symbol of a new beginning, an acknowledgement, a message that said, "We believe you'll build this life on your own." Danielle, my younger sister, appeared at my side right on cue as if she'd been tipped off. She flashed her signature charming American smile and said something that made me want to scoff. "Oh, sis, it's just a car." I turned to Marcus. He stood silently beside me, his face expressionless. But I knew the signs. His grip on my hand tightened just a bit more than usual. And that told me he was prepared for this. So was I. I looked at Danielle, my voice steady, not raised. "The envelope you gave us today was empty, but we took it as a symbolic gift." The air around us seemed to lose all oxygen. A few close friends nearby fell abruptly silent. I didn't need to turn to know my mother was losing a fraction of her composure. I didn't wait for their reaction. I simply whispered to Marcus, "Give it to them." He nodded, pulling a white envelope from his suit jacket and carefully handing it to my mother. Danielle leaned in, curious. My father stepped closer too, his face unusually tense for someone typically so yielding. My mother opened the envelope. Inside was a notarized legal document signed by me, Marcus, and our family lawyer. It confirmed that the wedding car was separate property, non-transferable, non-sellable, and non-giftable, without my written consent, and a valid notarized signature. Any unauthorized use or transfer would be considered a violation of property rights, with potential civil action to follow. I watched their reactions like an outsider observing a play I'd memorized. Danielle reacted first, her smile twisted. "Are you serious over a car?" I didn't respond. I just looked at her calmly. My mother stared at me as if I'd stabbed her in the heart. "Elena," she said, her voice quieter but no longer sweet. It's just because I was thinking of you. You and Marcus both work, you can share a car. Your sister's car is broken, and she's job hunting." I didn't interrupt her. I let her hear herself. "I'd heard those reasons my whole life," I said softly. "Mom, this isn't about the car. It's about how everyone always assumes what's mine is temporary, free to be redistributed whenever Danielle needs something." Danielle laughed, dripping with bitterness. "Here we go again. Still not over me getting the bigger room in middle school, huh?" I looked straight into her eyes. "It's not about the bedroom. It's about you always thinking what I have exists until you want it." No one spoke. No laughter. No clinking glasses. The room seemed to freeze. Marcus placed his hand on my back, a silent confirmation. "We're right." My father was the last to speak. "Are you turning your wedding into a courtroom?" I looked at him. Clearly, he wasn't used to seeing me push back. He'd taught me that silence was wisdom, that keeping the peace was the eldest daughter's role. But today, I wasn't the obedient eldest daughter. I was an adult defending my rights. I replied, "I'm not turning anything into anything. I'm just not staying silent anymore." Danielle stepped forward, grabbing the envelope again, staring at the papers. For the first time, I saw her at a loss for what to do. Her smile was gone. My mother tried to maintain her composure, but her hand gripped her purse tightly. A crack was forming at the corner of her mouth, where she always kept her perfect smile. My father stepped back, avoiding my gaze. I didn't wait longer. I turned to Marcus, took his hand, and smiled. "We should cut the cake." He nodded. I walked away, leaving them there. No more words. None needed. I'd spent my life in silence, yielding, accommodating, with the belief that family understands without words. But today I learned if you don't speak up, they'll write your script for you. I'm no longer a supporting character in my own life. That night, back at our small rented apartment, our temporary home before moving to our new house after the honeymoon, I opened my phone to a flood of unread messages, my mother Danielle, a few relatives, and aunt from out of state. I didn't read them. I just opened my phone, silently added them to my mute list. Marcus came out of the bedroom and asked softly, "You okay?" I nodded. I wasn't okay, not really. But I was free. And maybe for the first time I understood that those two things aren't the same. But they can coexist. I turned to Marcus and asked, "Do you regret marrying me?" He looked at me, smiling, his sincere, peaceful smile. "Best investment of my life." I laughed, then fell silent. I couldn't sleep that night. Despite the spacious hotel bed, the sheets smelling of fresh laundry, and Marcus lying beside me breathing evenly, his hand still finding mine in his sleep, my mind wouldn't stop. The room glowed with soft golden light, calm like a painting after a storm. But in my head, the storm hadn't passed. Not because I regretted what happened at the wedding. Not because I was confused or felt I'd overreacted. But because I was thinking about the years I'd lived as if yielding was my nature. As if silent endurance was part of being the eldest sister. I turned, watching Marcus in the dark. He didn't know I was awake. Or maybe he did, but stayed quiet because he knew I needed the silence. He always understood that from the very beginning. I closed my eyes, but the memories wouldn't let go. I saw our old room in the pale blue house in suburban Columbus, Ohio. Danielle and I shared a room as kids, but when she was 8 and I was 11, our parents decided to split us up. The bigger room with the window overlooking the backyard painted lavender, of course, went to her. I didn't ask why. I didn't even feel hurt. I remember my mother just saying, "Danielle's younger, she needs space to play." And me, I was older, I should understand. And I did. I always did. Danielle grew up like a kite, held by someone else's hands, soaring lightly. I learned to stand firm on the ground on my own 2 feet, because I had no string, no hands to catch me if I fell. I remembered the laptop I saved up for in my freshman year of college. I worked 3 jobs, one at the library, one at the campus cafeteria, and weekends helping at my aunt's bakery. It wasn't expensive, but it was the result of months of instant noodles and skipped outings. One day, Danielle borrowed it for a presentation. It fell. The screen cracked. I came back to our room, saw the broken laptop. Danielle sat on her bed, not crying, not apologizing, just saying it slipped out of my hands. I bit my lip, swallowing the bitterness. When my mother walked in and saw the scene, she sighed and said, "You should have backed up your data, Elena. Machines break all the time." I stayed silent. I remembered spending that night in the library rewriting my essay from scratch, amid the sound of strangers typing. Then there was the car. Danielle got her license at 16. Our parents helped her buy a used red car. A few months later, it was totaled in a crash. She was fine, thankfully, but instead of blame, they said it was the snow, the slippery roads, the old car. Me, it took 3 years of night shifts at a warehouse, sweating every morning at a coffee shop near campus to buy my first car. A dull, gray, ugly thing, but mine. Danielle isn't cruel. She's not malicious. She just never had to be accountable. She lived as if mistakes could be excused with family affection, and our parents unintentionally but effectively taught her that. Me, I was taught patience, silent sacrifice. Marcus stirred in his sleep, his hand still holding mine. I squeezed back, grounding myself. When I got engaged, Danielle didn't pretend to be happy. At the family dinner where I announced the news, she gave a mechanical smile, then turned to Marcus and said, "You sure Elena's a bit unpredictable?" The words cut through the table like a thin blade. I still smiled. I was too used to turning insults into air. She even joked that I'd finally lowered my standards, that Marcus seemed more like an accountant than a lover. Marcus just smiled, unruffled. He had a quiet way of making others realize their own tactlessness. I didn't say anything, but I saw. I remembered. I didn't fight back. I wasn't ready. Not until the wedding, when my mother spoke of the car, as if it were a cake to be sliced up for my sister, did something in me snap. Not because of the car, but because I was tired. Tired of being the one who understood, forgave, yielded. I remember Danielle's eyes when she read the legal document. For the first time in her life, she realized there was something she couldn't take with a simple, "You understand, right?" And my mother, she always thought she was fair, but she never realized my silence wasn't consent. It was habit, a form of exhaustion, a survival skill. I sighed, opening my eyes. The clock read 3:07 a.m. I thought about the letter Danielle would send later. I didn't know its contents yet, but I knew when someone used to being indulged writes a handwritten note and returns a key, it's unprecedented. And maybe, A first step. I wasn't sure if I'd forgive, not sure I wanted to mend things, but I knew I'd listen. This time, as someone with a choice. I turned, resting my head on Marcus's chest. His heartbeat was steady, slow. He wrapped an arm around me unconsciously. There, in the dark between old memories and the present pulse, I felt myself changing. Not into someone bitter, but into someone who no longer apologizes for protecting herself. Is this pettiness or revenge, Elena? The question wasn't whispered. It rang out clearly amid the cozy wedding scene I'd once imagined as the perfect end to one chapter, and a peaceful start to the next. Danielle's voice cut like cold metal, drawing eyes. Some whispered. Familiar faces in my peripheral vision paused in the hallway, champagne glasses hovering. Even the music seemed to falter. I didn't rush to answer. I lifted my head, looking at my sister. Danielle's face was no longer innocent or smug. It darkened. The eyes that once demanded priority were now stretched with confusion, anger, and a hint of helplessness. I took a step forward. Not to intimidate, but to see her up close. Not revenge, I said, my voice steady. Just the first time I said no. My mother stepped forward, still with her familiar, calm demeanor, but her voice trembled, not from emotion, but from being openly challenged. Elena, I know you're upset, but doing this in front of family friends, it's too much. Over a car. The phrase echoed like a suffocating refrain. In their eyes, everything I did today was excessive. Ungrateful. Making a scene. I turned to Marcus. He looked only at me. Without waiting for my signal, he pulled another envelope from his suit jacket. Thicker, heavier, with a red notary seal and a name, Danielle Layton. I took the envelope from my husband and gently handed it to my sister. Danielle took it, hesitating. All eyes were on her. I wasn't trying to humiliate anyone, but I wasn't going to keep yielding either. She opened the envelope, pulled out the paper. After reading the first few lines, she snapped her head up, her voice sharp. What is this? A separate legal notice, I replied, stating that my wedding assets cannot be redistributed, publicly posted, or used without consent. Danielle gripped the paper, her voice flaring despite the crowd nearby. My God, who do you think you've become? You think marrying Marcus makes you some big shot more powerful. You two really think this is noble. Marcus stood still, but his eyes were colder than usual. When he spoke, his voice was firm, not angry, but unyielding. Danielle, this isn't about status. It's about boundaries. My wife isn't using silence to buy peace anymore. I looked at my sister. She wasn't stopping. What I don't get, I said slowly, is that I didn't suddenly change. I've always been this way. I just didn't say it. But that didn't mean you had the right. You always think I want to steal everything from you, Danielle shot back, almost shouting. You think I don't have anything of my own. You've always had, I said. You had protection. You had excuses. You had a whole family backing you every time you were wrong. And me, I had responsibility. My mother tried to speak, but I didn't give her the chance. How many times did you say she's younger? You're older. You should yield. It's not a big deal, let it go. Did you ever think every time you said that I lost a piece of my voice? No one answered. I knew they'd never considered it a real consequence. Danielle sank into a nearby chair. Her hands still held the paper, but her eyes weren't on it. The crowd around us began to drift away as if afraid of being pulled into an undercurrent. Whispers started. Family drama blowing up like this. There must be more to it. Danielle was always spoiled. No one defended me, but no one fully sided with them either. Danielle looked up, her eyes defiant one last time. You always act superior. Like everything you have is because you earned it. Not because you married a well-off guy. Marcus squeezed my hand. I didn't need to look to know he was angry, but I took the lead. I didn't marry Marcus to change my life. I met him when I had a good job, a rented apartment I paid for myself, and a savings account to survive 3 months if I lost it all. I didn't marry to be saved. I married because I chose to. That wasn't to prove anything. It was for me to hear myself. I'd stood on my own 2 feet for years, not out of resentment, but because I wanted freedom. The air grew heavy as lead. I looked at my mother. She turned away, her eyes glistening. My father broke the silence. Enough. This is a wedding. It stops here. I nodded. Not because I agreed with him. I nodded because I'd said enough. I'd lived 30 years without my family truly understanding what I thought. I'd played the role of the mature one, the yielding one, the silent one, for too long. Now they'd heard me. Painful or embarrassing, I didn't regret it. I stepped away from the center, pulling Marcus with me. I didn't need apologies. I just needed to not stand there a second longer. Behind me, Danielle tossed the envelope onto the table, stood her heels clicking sharply against the tile. I didn't look back. I just held Marcus's hand tightly. We left the circle of gazes, toward the band. I whispered to the DJ that the party should go on. He hesitated for a moment, then played a soft, wordless melody. Laughter began to return, reluctant, but real. I didn't look back at my family, because I knew even if they stood there all night with accusing or regretful looks, what I needed was no longer with them. I stepped onto the dance floor again, not for tradition, not for the guests, but to affirm, I'm still me, and no one can take that away, not even those who once thought they could. We danced, Marcus and I, with or without music. Danced to end a night and begin a new life. But I didn't know. Another door was quietly opening behind me. Another envelope was coming, this time without a lawyer, just a trembling handwritten note. I'm sorry. I'd always thought silence was the reward of the victor. But as the days after the wedding passed, I realized silence isn't victory. It's a choice and a declaration. We returned to our small fourth-floor apartment in a quiet complex. Summer breeze slipped through the window each morning, carrying the scent of coffee from the corner shop. Logically, it was over, the wedding was done, the tension had erupted. The words that needed saying were said. But the feeling of unfinished business lingered in unread messages, wary coworker glances, and missed calls with no voicemails. On the third day after the wedding, I woke up before Marcus. I poured coffee, opened my phone to check emails, and instinctively went to Facebook. The first post was from my mother. A photo of a sunset over Lake Michigan captioned, "Learning to let go is painful, but sometimes necessary. Still praying for those who forget where they come from." I wasn't surprised, just tired. Marcus came out of the bedroom hair mussed, wearing a faded t-shirt. He yawned, looked at me, and reached for my coffee. I handed it over. He took a sip, then asked softly, "Facebook again?" I nodded. "Need to respond?" he asked, eyes on the cup. I shook my head. Soon after, Danielle posted an old photo, us as kids, sitting on the couch, me holding a book, her grinning wide. The caption was a jab. "Some people put material things above family. Hope it's worth it." 50 likes. Mostly from people who weren't at the wedding. Marcus sat beside me, saying nothing more. He never pushed. But I knew he understood those words weren't just shade. They were their way of continuing a story I'd tried to close with victim language. We sat quietly for a while, then I opened my phone, went to settings. I left the family group chat. I hid their accounts from my feed. Then I stood, walked to the front door, and changed the electronic lock code. "The garage too," I said. "Change the old code." Marcus looked at me for a moment, then nodded. No questions, no objections. By the 5th day, a package appeared in the mailbox. No sender's name. A familiar cream-colored envelope, the kind I'd chosen for the wedding. Inside was a car key, a folded note, and the same empty envelope Danielle gave at the wedding. This time the note wasn't blank. Danielle's handwriting hadn't changed since high school, slightly slanted capital letters taller than necessary dots round like bubbles. "Dear Elena, I don't know if I'm writing this to apologize or to be forgiven. I just know I can't sleep. I laughed that day, because I was embarrassed. Awkward, and I didn't understand. I thought you were just making a big deal. I thought it'd be like always, you'd soften. Mom would smooth it over and I'd get through like usual, but this time it wasn't. And I get it. I really get it. I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't deserve it. I just hope to be heard. When you're ready, Danielle." I read slowly, line by line. No tears, no trembling. Just something sliding through my chest, not quite relief, but not as heavy as before. Maybe surprise. Marcus walked in, saw me holding the letter. He sat across from me, silently watching me read. When I folded it, he asked, "What do you think?" I didn't answer right away. I looked at the key, the one for the car Marcus's family gave me. Still shiny, unscratched. I placed it on the table beside the note, then looked out the window. I remembered when Danielle dropped my laptop years ago. She didn't apologize, just blamed the slippery floor. I quietly bought another one. No one brought it up again. This time she didn't blame anyone. Not me, not Mom, not circumstances. She just said I didn't understand, and now I do. And to me, that was a lot. I didn't forgive. Not right away. But I didn't tear the letter. I didn't throw the key away. I put them in a small wooden box, locked it, and tucked it in a drawer. I said to Marcus. Not today, but maybe someday. He nodded. I get it. That evening I opened my laptop, created a blank document, and typed the title, Letter to Danielle. I didn't write anything yet, but naming it felt like something. We had a simple dinner, spaghetti salad, and leftover wedding wine. For the first time in days, I didn't feel like I was shrinking in my own home. After dinner, Marcus and I sat on the balcony. A gentle breeze blew. Streetlights cast a soft golden glow. I leaned my head on his shoulder. Do you think people can change? I asked quietly. Yes, he said, but only if they see themselves in the mirror and don't look away. I didn't know if Danielle had truly changed, but that letter to me was the first time she dared to look in the mirror, and that was a start. I still didn't know what I'd write in my reply, but I knew it wouldn't be with anger. I'd write as a sister, not the one who endured, but the one who stood up and could now choose keep distance or step closer. I wasn't sure if I was ready to step closer yet, but at least I wasn't turning away. And I didn't know that just days later I'd see Danielle again, not through a letter, not online, but in person. I didn't think I'd go. The invitation arrived on a midweek morning, still smelling of fresh paper and early sunlight. The sender was my aunt, my mother's younger sister. The event, little Ellie's birthday party, a cousin's daughter held at my aunt's house in suburban Lexington. A note added, it'd be great to have the whole family. You and your sister should come. I held the invitation for a long time. Marcus leaned over, read it, and asked, Want to go? I didn't answer right away. Part of me was exhausted just thinking about facing the people I'd tried to distance myself from. Another part was curious. Not about the party, but about Danielle. Would she show? And if she did, what would she do? Finally, I nodded. We'll go, but not for long. And so on a sunny Saturday afternoon, I wore a simple, light blue dress, hair tied up neatly, and Marcus drove through the old neighborhood I grew up in. It felt like stepping into an old movie, everything still there, but I was different. As we entered the backyard where the party was held, I heard children's music balloons popping and the smell of cake. Familiar faces nodded and smiled some greeting cautiously. No one mentioned the wedding. No one asked about the car. I guessed they knew, but chose not to touch the wound. I was placing a small gift on the table when I saw Danielle. She stood in the corner by the trees wearing a plain beige cotton dress. No heavy makeup like usual. No loud energy. No calling my name from afar. Just standing there. She saw me, and instead of turning away, she approached. Not too fast, not too close. I straightened, bracing for any opener, a half-hearted apology, a subtle jab, or worse, a fake smile. But none of that came. Danielle opened her purse, pulled out a thin rectangular object wrapped in old newspaper, and handed it to me. Her eyes wavering, but not avoiding mine. I think you should keep this. I took it, unwrapped it. It was a photo. Old, probably from when I was 8 and she was 6. We were on the front porch steps, my arm around her shoulders, her smiling brightly, holding a melting ice cream cone. The photo wasn't perfect. The lighting was harsh, the angle clumsy, but it was real, unposed, without judgment. I looked into my sister's eyes. She didn't say more, just stood there waiting, and for the first time I saw a look that didn't demand, didn't need defending, didn't blame. I nodded. No smile, no tears, just a slight nod. But in that nod were 1,000 emotions never allowed to surface. Marcus stepped beside me, glanced at the photo, then at Danielle. He said nothing, just nodded lightly, as if two strangers acknowledged each other in a fragile moment. Danielle said softly, Thanks for not throwing my letter away. I didn't respond, because I knew if I spoke, my voice might shake. I tucked the photo into my purse, careful as if handling something fragile, and I returned to the party. Not quite lighter, but something had settled, not loudly, but surely. My mother appeared later. She didn't approach me right away. Throughout the event, she chatted with relatives, took photos with Ellie, and smiled a smile more tired than usual. As I prepared to leave, she came over. Elena, she said softly. I waited. But she paused, then sighed. Forget it. Just go home. Drive safe. I nodded. No blame, no demands. We left the party as the sun softened balloons beginning to deflate. Marcus held my hand as we walked to the car. I still held the photo in my purse, not letting go. On the drive home, he asked, You okay? I turned to him. I think I'm starting to believe people can change. A little. If they really try. He smiled. Then maybe you're starting to forgive. I was quiet for a long time, then said, Forgiving doesn't mean forgetting. I still remember. I still hurt. But I don't want to carry it forever. Not because they deserve forgiveness, but because I deserve peace. Marcus took my hand, squeezing gently. The drive home felt shorter than usual, not because the road changed, but because I'd let go of what weighed me down. I didn't know if my mother would ever apologize, or if Danielle would truly change. But I knew I'd done the right thing, kept the good memories, and let go of the burden. The photo stayed in my purse when I walked into our house. I placed it on the bookshelf next to our wedding photos, the house deed, and a scrap of paper I'd scribbled on a sleepless night. Freedom doesn't come from leaving, but from not having to go back. That evening, Marcus baked an apple pie. I made tea. We sat together reviewing wedding photos on the projector for the first time since that day. The wind chime creaked softly outside. I stood, walked to the window, and pulled back the curtain. Outside was pitch dark, only the moon reflecting on the lake. Marcus stood behind me, arms around my waist. Still thinking about them, he asked. I nodded. Not every day, but sometimes. He didn't say more, just held me closer, and I said, not turning, but loud enough for him to hear, I don't need them to understand. I just need to know what held me back and what I've learned to leave behind. We stood there for a few minutes amid the wind and quiet light. I didn't know what the future held. Didn't know if my mother would ever truly understand, or if Danielle would find herself. But I knew my life from here was no longer about pleasing anyone, and in that moment I felt enough. A year ago I made a choice to stop, then to move forward. Today, I'm still moving, but no longer looking back to confirm. Just the wind ahead and an unshaped road. But this time, it's my road. Open, honest, and unbound, I said softly to Marcus as he opened the car door for me. Where to now? He smiled, squinting into the distance. Somewhere we don't need permission for. I got in, closed the door. The engine started. The wind rushed in, and I knew one chapter was fully closed, no regrets. But a new one had just begun. And this time, I held the pen. Looking back on my journey, I realized forgiveness isn't weakness, but a courageous choice. Family shouldn't be a place where we shrink under pressure, but where we can be ourselves, unafraid of comparison, possession, or dismissal. My story isn't just about a car, but about the right to set boundaries, to say no, and to be loved rightly. I've learned that sometimes letting go doesn't mean abandoning family, but refusing to live in silence. We can't change others, but we can change how we face them. If you've seen yourself in this story, whether as the one who endured, the one who stayed silent, or the one beginning to regret, I hope you find empathy and strength in my experience. Thank you for following my story to the end. If it resonated, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share, so more people can feel heard. I'm Elena, and this is my journey to reclaim myself.